Simona Hamer from Slovenia, Himali Kothari from India, and Marwa Manai from Tunisia. We have roughly 80 or 90 minutes, and what you can expect from us is a bit of context. We wanted to talk about the climate crisis, how it affects your respective countries and the theater scene in those places, and how does theater react locally to a global problem. That would be the first part of our talk. Then we are going to the big topic of this panel, how to write about the crisis. And we'll talk about eco-dramaturgy and content and form and some very specific matters of authoring a play and also some very general things concerning the climate crisis. You are very welcome to join in with your questions. We will open it up at the end, but if you have something urgent, just raise your arm and someone will come with a microphone. You can do that if it really burns. And a warm welcome also to the people that are watching the stream live or afterwards. Welcome to Deutsches Theater. That's where we are right now, at Deutsches Theater Berlin. We are part of the Autorinnen-Theatertage, and the 4 authors all have contributed to a podcast series called ATT On Air. They have written stories of hope, courage, and optimism in a heating world. We will be talking about that as well. And now I'm going to introduce them. You will have to wait and remain silent for another moment, but then I'm really looking forward to talking to you. Next to me, just have to use my notes, is Marwa Manai. She is a theatre maker and associate professor of English. She graduated from the Tunisian National Theatre Acting School and collaborated in world touring productions as an actress and co-writer, but as well as a playwright and stage director. So she has a very large portfolio of theatre making. She also has studied theatre making, a master's at the University of York with a scholarship. And she currently is a dramaturgy trainer at the same school she studied at, the Tunisian National Theatre Acting School. Very warm welcome. Hello, Marwa. Next to her from Mumbai, she has flown in just this morning, and I really admire her for sitting here with a large jet lag, I guess, is Himali Kothari. Hello. She's a freelance writer and creative editor since 2006. She's writing reports, short stories, theater plays, as well as text for websites. Her plays on climate change were part of the Climate Change Theatre Action, which is a big initiative to collect and author pieces about the climate change. And her piece Friends for Life, which is also about climate change and the climate crisis, was published by the New York-based organization The Arctic Cycle, and it was also shown at Schauspielhaus Graz, and that's where DT knows Himali from. So hello. Simona Hamer comes from Ljubljana in Slovenia. She has been here a few days, like Pat Tojan and Marwa Manai. They have taught a workshop this afternoon and have seen a few pieces at the Autorinnen-Theatertage. Simona is also a freelance playwright and a dramaturg, and she has co-created more than 40 theater performances and radio plays, and has been winning several awards, among them the Slovenian National Award for Best Play in 2017 and Best Libretto in 2019. Simona's plays are staged all over Slovenia and also translated, among the others, into English, German, Italian, Serbian, and they have been shown in Germany, especially in Wiesbaden, and in Austria at Graz, and that's how DT knows you as well. Welcome. Pat Tojan has a long time in Germany behind him. He lives in Hong Kong again, but he in 2021-22 he was resident author at the Nationaltheater Mannheim. His theater text, A Concise History of Future China, was invited to the Theatertreffen Stückemarkt in 2016. That's how he got to Germany. And his plays were staged in Frankfurt, Saarbrücken, Munich, and Freiburg. Recently, Neo Metropolis premiered in Gießen. And this is a piece with which he started a new series of plays. He likes to write in series, I have the impression. And this new series is about the coexistence of human and non-human beings on Earth. And that might be a topic for us today as well. Hello, Pato. So now we finally hear from you. Would you care about to tell us about the climate crisis and how it hits your respective countries and how the art scene is reacting to that? Is it a big challenge, or was it, is adaptability something that's known for a long time? Would you like to start, Pato?
Testing. As you know, you may know that Hong Kong is at the subtropical climate, so it means that it is quite hot, and because of the global warming, Hong Kong is even suffering even hotter climates. So it is rather not something in the future. Before that, we say, okay, we should do something for the next generation, but it's not. And for Hong Kong, it has some history about struggling about the environmental policy, because in the first 10 years of the millennium, and then Hong Kong citizens are very keen on doing recycling, but then finally found that it is really stupid that those recycling materials don't go to the use of recycling. And then after in the second 10 years of the Hong Kong government's policy, they made much more efforts on improving this situation. Especially now Hong Kong, it is very interesting because Hong Kong governments on one side, they are, you know the Hong Kong's political situation, but for the environmental policy, they attain or they achieve, or they want to achieve almost one of the lowest carbon emission place in 2030, because also it is some kind of due to the head of the education, not environmental protection bureau, because he's an architect and then he has this kind of mission and also knowledge to promote. And I think one of the if I say about the good thing about Hong Kong, how to protect the environment, and then one of the good thing is that I have written on the ATT on air, because in Hong Kong, according to the history, starting from 1960s, and then we have a great proportion of conservation of country park. That is the countryside. I know that there is no German term of country park, right? It means
Naturschutzgebiet, something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Areas of green land.
Yeah, Hong Kong is a very small city, but with 7 million people, but it's smaller than Berlin. But 7 million people, but we have like 49% of the conservation of countryside.
And it was this rise in 1967, wasn't it? It's what you told in this podcast series, that the government decided they need to have nature to calm people down. So it was kind of an instrumental choice to have a lot of nature parks, but it worked, it seems, until, recently.
Yeah. So it's something, if you talk about how Hong Kong faces the climate crisis, and then I say, it's something Hong Kong has done. And also there is an increasing number of Hong Kong people. They also concerned about how to preserve the countryside, and also they become vegetarian, and so more ways of choices of living in Hong Kong. But is it something that we are doing really well? I can't say that, but at least it shows an improvement trend. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So we have a city that is warming but has a kind of goal to become environmentally friendly. How's it in Slovenia, in Ljubljana, Simona?
I would say it's very similar to the rest of European countries, Western European countries. We were kind of not ignorant, I would say, but we weren't like directly affected by the climate crisis until like a couple of years. For example, like last year we had this really big floods. A year before we had like this really wild forest fires. We are waiting what is going to happen this summer, I guess. But maybe what I would like to point out is something that has been happening in recent years. This is like quite an achievement, I would say, for Slovenians. A lot of like civilian movements, a lot of initiatives, a lot of NGOs joining into like climate crisis action. For example, one of them, really big one, was in 2021. At that time, we had like this really right-wing government trying to impose, you can imagine, old type of new laws. One of them actually was privatization of water resources. And we Slovenians said no. There was like this big campaign, a big referendum with the biggest turnout in Slovenian 30-year history. And I think it was around almost like 90% of the voters said no. And after that, we have like in our constitution written the right to access to water. Maybe an interesting fact, this initiative was led or coordinated by a group of very young women. It's Institute of 8th of March. It's the name of the NGO. And our prime minister at the time tweeted that they're like just a bunch of silly girls that should be disciplined. I'm really happy that he was wrong. And they basically work on a very volunteer basis. I'm also one of the volunteers. So it's really a big civilian movement. And at that time, we were like right in the middle of a campaign that concerns all the European passport holders, because you can support the petition for reproductive rights. It's called My Voice, My Choice.
Thanks so much. So we have the people that are acting to save their water and the climate. What's it about in India, in Mumbai especially, Himali?
So I think what puts India in a very unique situation is that there's a lot of disparity. So there is a lot of progress, but at the same time there is a lot of a big need for progress as well. So we are almost on some level split into two populations, where a large majority is one with facing a lot of economic difficulty. So it feels very privileged to tell people who are facing economic difficulty to think about the globe, to think about the world, to think about climate, because there is a lot that they are already dealing with. So what does one do with that? Which is, I think, what makes the whole aspect of dealing with climate change so personal. Because when it becomes personal, you don't need for somebody else to tell you what to do. And drawing from what you just said, a couple of years ago, I found out about this group of women who live in a really small village in the heart of India. And these are women who've always been subservient to the male population in their families or villages. So they cover their heads and, basically just tend to the household chores and work in the fields. And this part of India is very dry. So they don't get water for, a very large time of the year, especially during summer. And what that does is that the women have to walk many kilometers to get water. So they are directly suffering from that shortage of water, but nobody's solving that problem for them because it's the women's problem to go get the water. So a bunch of them, guided by an activist, decided to do something about it. So they began to dig up bore wells to get underground water so that they wouldn't have to walk. They started repairing the wells. So if something broke, they didn't wait for anybody else to come and do it. They would pick up the tool belts and go and fix it. And what started with one small village and a group of maybe 8 or 10 women has now, from what I understand, taken up more than 80 villages and like 300-400 women in the fold. And this was not policy, this was not the government, this was not authority, this was just a bunch of young women who decided that they were not going to walk miles and miles for water. So I think what that teaches us, and I think maybe world over, but definitely in a country like India where it's really, the disparity is too much, is that when it becomes personal, everyone cares. And everyone tries to do something about it. There's a story I read about a man in the south of India who single-handedly created a forest. He just planted trees and did stuff in a way where he single-handedly created a forest. Nobody asked him to, nobody made a law, but he did it. So I think for me, it's not so much about a climate crisis only. I think it's always a battle between climate crisis and economic crisis, especially in emerging economies like my country. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for this talk about the disparities and the strength of the individual and the communities. Himali. Marwa, what's it about in Tunisia?
Pretty much the same as Himali was saying, and I do believe there is a correlation between the economic status of a country and their sort of how much of a priority the ecological crisis is in that place. There is a lot of ambivalence in Tunisia because ever since I was a child, I remember we had this mascot called Lebib, and in Arabic we say Lebib lilbi habib, which means Lebib is the friend of nature. And there were like all these initiatives where we loved this mascot, so we dress up like him and we try to collect the garbage and stuff like that. But at the same time, that was the government trying to implement some measures that seem like we are trying to do something for the environment, whereas deep down, we are economically, we are dependent on so many other parts of the world because we can't make ends meet. That's just the reality of it. And also politically, it's been a bit like a series of, there's been a lot of mayhem happening in the past couple of decades in Tunisia, and I think in other parts of that region, the MENA region, and also Africa. That to say the environment and the ecological crisis is a top priority would be just pretty much lying to ourselves. So when it becomes something quite concrete, people tend to self-organize in sort of personal initiatives that lead to immediate change, just like these women who try to group up because of water scarcity and stuff like that. But it's at the same time, it's still, there is a lot of almost disbelief of the reality of it. And now, in the past 3 to 4 years, I think, the heat waves in summer have become unbearable. That is, it reaches up to 50 degrees Celsius, which is mad. It's like you can't live in 50 degrees Celsius, you just stop living. And it is that, I think it's starting now to sink in that the problem is real. From there to it becoming a topic for art, for example, it's still a long way to go. So the ambivalence is there, that it does exist, and there are people who are trying to push that, and the government is doing more or less things to help. But at the same time, it's like when the imminent danger is not finding food on the table the next day, you sort of tend to really shrug it off when it comes to environment because, well, you're not going to live anyway to see the consequences of that. And that's the struggle at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, your countries aren't responsible for a solution. That's us here in the Western world who have the means to do that. So, okay, you're shaking your head. That's interesting. What do you think about that?
What do I think about...
that I just said that Western countries are responsible for the solution and not Tunisia or India.
I think if we continue to divide the world in this around these political lines, we will never really find a solution. I don't believe that the Western world will bring the solution, and I do believe that it's that line of thought that brought us to this situation. It's that power dynamic, it's these political divides that have brought humanity to the situation we're in today, where there's always this, like, the politics of it, and there's this system of, like, the hegemony of one part of the world deciding for the rest of humanity is what led to the current state, like, situation. And I think if we are trying to repair it by reproducing the same mechanism that led to the crisis, I genuinely don't see that going far. That's just my very personal, humble opinion on it.
Yeah, thank you very much for correcting me, because as we now see, there's a deeply ingrained injustice in this whole topic, as we all know, about what makes it harder to act upon climate crisis. Yes, you just mentioned that until it being a part of the arts or a topic of the arts, there might be some time still in Tunisia, yet you are here and it is one of your topics. So could you maybe tell a bit more about how theatre in Tunisia reacts to the climate crisis, or at what state it is at all?
There is this interesting... when it comes with the discipline, a lot of there is theory being made now about it being called like eco-dramaturgy as a discipline on its own right. And I think what's very interesting about this appellation is that it applies to both form and content. And content is, we talk about the crisis in different ways. We talk about it by paying attention to what we call the more than human perspective in this. We talk about it by conceiving of the whole world as a series of interconnected ecosystems that need all to be brought to attention. But when it comes to form, it is how to make theatre in a way that is sustainable and in a way that sort of takes into consideration the ecological ramifications of production, for example. And I think it's in that it's like this, in this way that it's quite interesting to look at Tunisia and other countries of North Africa, for example, as an example in the sense of we don't have the choice because we don't have the luxury to spend that much money on theatre and artistic production. Actually, the means are quite limited, and in a way, it's like, to look at it from the positive side, is that recycling, for example, has been a habit ingrained in our practices from the very get-go, because, well, technically, we don't have the money or the luxury or the privilege to spend huge amounts of money on producing theatre, for example. So all of these little habits that are now being considered very avant-gardist and ecological and are just a natural way of being because you can't do otherwise. And if you look at it from that perspective, I think it's when I gave an example a couple of days ago about a festival in Tunisia, one of the most important ones. And there was this artist who came, he's a designer, and he spent like a long period of time in a residency, and he was coming up with a prototype for seating that is ecological. And basically what it was just wrapping used clothes from like flea market and then putting them in huge bags and wrapping them. And he spent like a month working on that, and then he was presenting it. And he's such a sweet soul, and he meant well, and he was very genuine about it. Except that when we looked at it, it's literally the seating we have, like that's what we use on a daily basis, simply because we don't have the luxury of bringing like huge pickup trucks and having them filled with chairs and then taking them elsewhere. So this is just the logical, natural way to do things. And it was like you just look around you, and it's quite ecological to begin with, because we can't afford to do it otherwise. I do believe that the level of consciousness about it differs. This is how aware people are about the fact that they're being very eco-friendly. I can't answer that, but I do know that a lot of the practice of theatre, so the form that we were talking about in Tunisia, is quite eco-friendly, albeit without necessarily being aware of it. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for this example with the seating designer. That's another learning here. Look around what's already there and do not reinvent it for new, because that's not sustainable as well. Yeah. Peto, I'm asking you, how's Hong Kong theatre reacting to the climate crisis?
And actually, I think the situation is rather similar to Tunisia. I think it is it goes far away. I mean, not many so-called professional theatre makings concerned about the climate crisis. Not too many, but at the same time, it's also interesting because we also, the theatre makers spend a lot of time on doing the education for teenagers or for children. And interestingly, there is a much higher proportion of doing the theatre works to promote the awareness towards climate crisis for this kind of educational theatre. I think because in Hong Kong there is a background like that, because the topic is how to write about the crisis. In Hong Kong we are facing other kind of crisis. As I've said, in Hong Kong, after 2019, the political situation has changed. And also, I think there is a kind of emotion and also atmosphere that the Hong Kong people feel. And also the theatre makers want to share this emotion and thoughts with the audience and the public, but in a way that you won't got trouble. You understand what I mean? Okay.
So the emotion being climate fear, or
I think not only about climate fear. It's much more about the fear that we lose the freedom of speech, freedom of expression.
Okay, so it's political. That's
politically, yes. So in Hong Kong we are facing different kinds of crisis, and also at the same time, more Hong Kong people leaving Hong Kong for living in other countries, and so it's also like causes kinds of diaspora. Yeah, I mean, it means that more people leave, and then there are lots of farewells, and also the composition of the society has changed. This kind of crisis, but as I've said, at the same time, it is very interesting. For education theatre, we do a lot about how to deal with the climate crisis. Yeah, so it is a bizarre situation. Yeah.
I see, yeah, and thank you for the hint at the crises, not this crisis. I mean, we implicate it's the climate crisis, but we have wars and we have a pandemic and so on, like political repression. There's a lot of crises that theatre has to deal with, or the societies, yeah. Simona, how's Slovenian theatre concerning itself with the climate crisis?
I'm nodding my head now what you said about like this educational purpose. I think it's a very hot topic in Slovenian youth theatre, and I recently done like a series of workshops on dramaturgy and writing for like high school students, and of course I thought that this is something that's going to be very interesting for them to talk about environmental issues, and they were like, oh no, we are so fed up with it, everybody is attacking us with that subject, we want to talk about something else. Because they really feel kind of targeted, by all of us teaching them what should they think and so on. So this is maybe the first thing I would like to address. The second one being like, I believe that Slovenian theatre was very into like recycling, upcycling and stuff like that in 2008 in the big financial crisis. And afterwards we kind of forgot about it. We kind of like enjoyed the luxury of, letting our imagination gone wild. There are a few directors or a few playwrights that are more like activistic, and they do like more of like diverse theater practices, not necessarily classical theater performances, but we do have in recent years a few plays that are dealing specifically with environmental issues. And I would like to just point one example that I feel really wonderfully illustrates this kind of tension between what is put on stage and how the theater production actually works. It was at the end of the last season. This drama occurred, but yes, I have to start at the beginning, sorry. A dear colleague of mine, Caterina Morano, wrote this beautiful play, A Fall of a Tree. It's the title, I think it would be translated like that. And it's a play, of course, about a group of neighbors who gather to protect this one tree in front of their apartment building, because the plan is to cut the tree down to make room for these luxury apartment buildings. Like gentrification is a big issue in, of course, like all of the bigger cities. This was the play, and the play was put on stage in one of our national theaters, and it was a big hit. It attracted quite a lot of diverse audience, like schools came to see the play, and the audience was really excited. And then at the end of the season, finally, the renovation of our national theater started. The renovation was long overdue, of course. And what was the first thing that they did? Of course, they cut down this very old, beautiful, I think 150-year-old chestnut tree, and 11 other trees surrounding the building of the theater. And of course, when we find out about what they're planning to do, we had like a little protest, just like in that play, actually. We recited poetry, we had like plays staged in front of the tree, all, of course, for nothing. But maybe what was interesting for me was like how the artistic community reacted to that. There were people, of course, like very engaged, very open, very vocal. And then on the other hand, there were people who were like, well, maybe we shouldn't oppose progress, you know. This was like this kind of intellectual voices, let's say. And another thing that I think for me personally is also sometimes a struggle. A lot of my artistic colleagues who work as a freelancers and also work in this national theater were like, I really would like to participate in the protest. I would really like to, you know, let my opinion be heard, but I'm afraid to be like blacklisted. So, just to give you a little overview of the complex situation of Slovenian theater landscape.
I mean, it's a very typical situation, I guess, like practice what you preach, what's on stage may not be what's behind it. So that's a topic we're like discussing or tackling here as well. And it's at the core of the climate change, I guess, because you can tell a lot and greenwash all the stuff you own, but you won't solve the problem. Thank you. Himali.
You know, in India, we have a very long-standing tradition of activism theatre. It's centuries old. We've always used theatre to create awareness. So during freedom struggle, to spread the message of, you know, fighting against the British Empire, it was masked in the form of regional plays. So, you know, we've used theatre for activism for a very, very long time, before the British, before that as well. So we're seeing a lot of that now as well. We do have what I would call theatre for entertainment. So you have the big, you know, the big stage and the big productions and a lot of money to create it and a lot of money spent to see it. And then you have the smaller productions, which people like me, my friends, we're all a part of, which is produced with very little money and does not need a big stage to be produced. We can, you know, perform it at a street corner. We do a lot of street theatre in India. We have theatre groups that go into villages and spread awareness. They've done it, you know, to encourage villagers about birth control, about coming out to vote, everything. So similarly, climate crisis also becomes a part of this activism theatre and becomes a part of street theatre. It's perhaps not at the moment as big as what it should be, but that's maybe because I think it's still dawning on us how important, it is to deal with this crisis. But I must say I'm quite proud of the fact that activism theatre is something that is really big in India. We have the culture of using theatre to spread awareness about topics that are relevant, whether it's in the urban areas or it is going into the smallest of towns and villages. And it will be the young urban folk who will do that. They will take the topics and they will tell it in a story form. They will use song and dance. They will use language specific to that community, specific vocabulary, specific to that people, so that the message goes across. And considering the number of languages and the diversity of population, I think that's quite an achievement. Yeah.
And is there a form of exchange between those groups? Because what in Germany happens is you always found an organization, like a large organization, where the smaller ones gather and have exchanges about ideas and stuff. Is that kind of coordinated as well, or?
I think it's very difficult to measure the effect, of storytelling on a certain issue. Because if you have a drive to ban to impose a ban on the use of plastic, you can measure that by saying that last month this much plastic was used, and after this drive this much plastic less is being used. But when you tell a story, which is what theatre does, the message somewhere lives in the head of the audience, and they walk out of the theatre, and if that message has enough effect and enough impact, they carry it forward, and they maybe go out for a coffee and have a conversation about that story with the people they're having coffee with. And that is the spread of a story, which is impossible to measure. But I think it is a more qualitative effect than a quantitative effect. So I don't think, I think that is what motivates storytellers to continue to tell stories that matter, because we're not looking at how many people it impacted, we're looking more at how much it impacted, if that makes sense.
So writing stories that have an impact, is that what's at the heart of yourself concerning the climate crisis in your writing? We have talked about the context now. Maybe you can now go to your own practice and your ideas about how should we write about the crisis, which is our actual topic. So we've heard a lot of interesting stories. Himali, maybe we start with you again. What made you write about the climate crisis, and what's your focus? What interests you most?
I think for me, I don't try to look at it as so much as writing about a crisis, because a crisis is something that millions or thousands of people face. So how do you write a story about something that millions of people are going through? You can do a speech about it, but how do you write a story about it? So I think you focus, and which is what we were talking about today at the workshop as well, that you focus on that one person, because a story is always about one person and how it affects that one person. And if you can connect one person, I think it has a ripple effect. When you talk about thousands, you talk about a statistic. A statistic is easily forgotten. I will forget a statistic the minute I walk out of this door. But if the story connects with me, it will stay with me. I will think about it. I will ponder over that one person. Like, what happened to Jack? Why did he go through that, right? And what could have been done for him not to go through that? So, I think that's what I think about when I'm writing. That whose story do I want to tell? I don't want to tell a story about a whole population, but I want to think about that one person in that population. So even if it's about like the story about the women in the village, even if there were 4 women, I want to think about that one woman who decided that I'm done with walking miles and miles to fetch water. I'm going to do something about it. And if I can get an audience to connect with the story of that one single woman, then that will have more effect than me bombarding an audience with the number of women who are suffering from this. So that is how I choose to write about a crisis, which is exactly, I think, how I would choose to write about write a love story. Because millions of people fall in love, but in my story, it's A falling in love with B, and that's all that I'm focusing on. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to this.
Yeah, and I think I share some of the similarities about writing, and actually for writing, okay, for me, it is split into 2 parts. One is about writing essay. Actually, I sometimes write essay. Say if I want to tackle some issues about the climate crisis and I want to make it very clearly, or no one misunderstands. Everyone can take the message, and then I will choose to write essay. But for writing a play or writing novel, and then I focus much more on the imagination, how we can jump out of the box. And from my latest play, New Metropolis, it is the starting point is I want to write something about the climate crisis. And then I start to do research, and then one idea that attracts me, so-called attracts me, that is actually we are undergoing the 6th extinction on the life history of the Earth. That is like, okay, previously there is an extinction, the phase of extinction of dinosaurs. And then also previously, okay, all like the second one, all the ocean animals, they died suddenly because of the climate change. And then now it is the 6th, and then it is initiated by humans. And then I think, oh, it is really crazy. We do something to start the extinction. And then, so I keep asking deeper questions about what is the relationship between the humans and nature. Okay, surely humans are part of the nature, but okay, how can I put it, and how can I think about it? So it is the starting point of me writing New Metropolis. It is, the way of thinking is very different from writing essay and writing a play. Yeah.
So it's more metaphorical and the language is different. What else would you say about the message? Because you just mentioned essay has a message that can be understood. What would be the impact of a play if you want to tell something?
Yeah, my writing style is rather like a magical realism, because my favorite writer is Haruki Murakami and also Garcia Gabriel Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. So starting from my youth, and then I am already fascinated by this idea, because I can see a lot of possibilities behind. And also when writing a play, and then I want to open much more possibilities for interpretation. But okay, at the same time, you also understand the message behind that I want to say something about the topic. Okay, I can take one example because I would take too long time to explain the story, so I just skip the story. And then in one, there are 2 characters. One of the characters in New Metropolis, okay, she is a human, but she hates humans. And because she finds, okay, the smart city does a lot of harm on the environment. And then, but she comes across, finally, after many years, she comes across with a boy. And the boy is coming from the smart city, and the girl lives in the forest, and the boy is from the smart city, and then they have a conversation, and then the boy say, "I'm sorry for becoming a human." Yeah, and he said this sentence, and then when I write, because I also have some anger about what we have done. I mean, as humans, that we started the extinction, and then I wrote this sentence, and then. an audience, okay, I have got the feedback from the dramaturg in Gießen, and then he's got the feedback from the audience, and then she said, immediately, she feels to be understood. It's something that I don't expect when I'm writing this line, okay, and then I'm angry, so I write this line. Yeah, that's something I want to do in a play. Yeah.
So if you ask how to write about the crisis, one answer was you write stories that affect people and where the crisis can be told through a person's decisions or views of the world. And you told about using dialogue of a play to bring nature and the city or the humans in a dialogue and having them have a conversation. Marwa, how do you deal with the climate crisis in your writing?
I don't. Very unpopular opinion, I'm aware. I think whenever I hear that a play is about the ecological crisis, I struggle to go and see it. And it's because most of the time I know what it is about. And I think most of the people who are watching it with me know what it is about. And it winds up being a group of people who are aware of a crisis, who are telling each other about how horrible the crisis is, and not a lot winds up happening. And I've struggled a bit with that. I think one way to perhaps approach the topic artistically is to... There is this anthropocentric way of approaching this crisis that bothers me a lot, and it is because it's basically the human in a much larger connection of beings that live on this planet and in the universe. It's just this very small fraction of it that is the human being that's caused most of this turmoil. And today we're talking about the Anthropocene, and the Anthropocene being the first era where the human is the major factor of change in the environment. So if the human brought us to this situation, and then the human is only continuing to struggle with it because their demise is at stake and they only look at it from their perspective, then something is just not going right in a way. So, and then if we look at all the, what we call the more than human around the human, and then we sort of do away with this hierarchy where the human beings are put on top of the ladder, and we start looking at other creatures around us, then we'll realize, first of all, that, well, the crisis is the crisis of men, whereas humanity has always had struggles. So there is this feeling of angst and counterproductive sort of fear that needs to be relaxed a little bit in order to properly think about how we can overcome this. And I feel that the more we build it as a crisis and the more we talk about it as something of a huge struggle, the less we do about it, because there is this feeling of, well, it's already done with, then why would I bother? And that I have an issue with. So if we start building it into our habits to look at the world in a different way, then maybe then something could happen. And there's this very interesting concept of fifth wall dramaturgy. It's Una Chowdhury who put it together beautifully. And I think the point of it is to look at the sky as this fifth wall. And the idea is to stop looking around us and to stop making sociopolitical drama, and maybe to look up, because up is the only space where humanity is still human. It's not Western, it's not Eastern, it's not African, it's not Latin American, it's just a human being human, and we're all tied in under the same sort of destiny in relation to other creatures that are, you know, up there. And so if you start looking at it from that point of view, then maybe we make less sort of naturalistic theater, because funny enough, there is no nature in naturalistic theater. It's like either a backdrop or it's this pastoral, romanticized dreaming of nature. But nature is not green. Nature is but it has many colors. And the problem of ecology is very transactional. So if you consider nature as being all of it put in together into this system that created race issues, class issues, misogyny, all sorts of oppression, really, it's one tied-in system. And that system is built in a way that is very difficult to dismantle. So if you continue to write about it in the same way, then inadvertently we are reconstructing the same system. So if you make nature a spectacle, then in a way you are fetishizing this idea of what nature is and how to sort of do something about it. So if you make it a spectacle, you automatically create a distance, and then people who come watch this spectacle have a feeling that they've done something. And then they go home feeling very relaxed because they are activists and they're doing things about nature. They're watching a play, but no, you're not doing anything if you're just watching a play. And if I'm just writing a play, I'm not doing anything. As a matter of fact, I'm consuming more carbon footprint. I'm burning paper. The productivity side of it costs us ecologically. So I don't have an answer per se, but I think that starting to maybe look and sort of approach the subject of the crisis and maybe stop calling it a crisis and approach this idea of where should the human stand vis-a-vis other creatures in the universe, and how do we start recreating and redoing and sort of dismantling and recreating our basic social infrastructure, then maybe that's when sustainability would sort of properly have an impact. And it's not going to be tomorrow or the day after, I have a feeling. Again, very unpopular opinion, I'm aware, but that's where I stand at the moment.
No, but I mean, it's at the core of the problem again, because what role can theatre play? I mean, is it just nice have to, or is it really at the center of human needs? And what are your thoughts on that? Or
I think as a theatre maker, at least, I struggle to remain humble and modest, and realize that the number of people who make theatre and watch theatre is very limited compared to the rest of the world, and people are de facto consuming other entertainment outlets. So theatre is today has very limited power, at least in Tunisia and other parts of the world that I've worked in. So to sort of make it the place to save the environment and to make all theatre about must absolutely be green, to me feels a bit counterproductive. I think if we consider, if it becomes an ingrained practice, if you are sort of sustainable in your practice, if you consider, if that is your worldview is based on this, then you don't necessarily need to make a play about it. It just becomes one element in a major change wave that will snowball into actually bringing change without necessarily highlighting the ecological side of it in every single production. So does theatre play a role? Yes. Is it the role? No, at all, I think. When we have private jets, when we have genocides that are happening in the world whose cost on the environment is just drastic, when we have consumerism raging through our lives and habits, then going to a play or writing a play seems to me quite minor, and being aware of that keeps us grounded so that we continue to do, but we do in a balanced and sort of realistic way. Yeah.
Simona, what are your thoughts on that?
I can relate to a lot of things that my colleague said. Maybe if I put Simona, the person, aside and just think about this from an artistic perspective, me being an artist, I do feel a great responsibility to be aware of the privilege that I have to be able to speak, to be able to write, to be able to have my work put on stage, to have an opinion that is heard, although it's from a very a small group of people. I often think about what type of theater or what type of art speaks to me in the period of my life that I'm currently in. I had others. I don't know, I think we are all really, really tired of this manifests in theater, of theater being very loud, very unapologetic, very pointing fingers and telling us what we should think or yelling at us or something, or at least this is something that I've kind of grown out of in the recent years. So for me, I always have the feeling that whatever I write, because I mostly write about life in the 24th century from a very privileged European perspective, I'm aware, is writing about some type of crisis or difficulties or some type of struggles. So for example, I would say that, I don't know, the play that I did about corporate world, structures, hierarchy, mental health issues, it's also, in my opinion, very related to environmental issues, and my own sustainability is something that is, again, very connected to the greater topic. For now, what I feel inspired by, because I cannot function in this world of despair and of nothing can be done, it's something that kind of isn't in my nature, in my character. What I'm really drawn to is to think how to be gentle and how to be more soft and how to be, what you all said, very personal, write about individual stories from a very this polyvocal, inclusive perspective. I think this is the magic of theater, because you can have, I don't know, chandeliers on the stage telling their stories, or we heard trees and caterpillars and different characters on the presentation of our workshop. And this is something that is so inspiring for me as a writer. I have, maybe I'm not allowed to say this, but I have a lot of fun when I have to write about also crisis. And I think this is really important, to kind of find joy also in addressing this shitty world that we all live in, with these catastrophes and genocides and crises and everything that is going on. Because I think we kind of forgotten about we know all the functions of storytelling, to educate, to entertain, of course, to connect, what you mentioned, but there's also this healing aspect of stories that was hugely important when the patriarchal society wasn't as present as it is today. And for me, this is something that I would like to kind of look into it more. What kind of healing potential does maybe theater or art in general has? Because for me, where I find inspiration or consolation is exactly in feeling connected to myself, to other human beings, to nature, to, I don't know, universe, whatever. And yes, this is maybe my inspirational talk. Thank you so much.
Can I say one thing immediately in response to Simona? Because she said finding joy is very important. And then I recently read once, I forgot who said that. He said, the writer said, if one is brutal to himself, to oneself, he or she has to be finally be brutal to others and also the environment. So finding joy is very important. I agree, totally agree.
So that brings us to the topic of hope as well, because we mentioned it before that the ATT podcast series had kind of the obligation to write optimistic, hopeful, courageous stories about a heating world. You already told us, Simona, that joy is important for you. As authors and with your responsibility that you're telling stories to other people, how do you factor hope into that? And Petr-Jan, you mentioned that you like to write stories of hope and not so much stories of despair, because those destruction movies or books can be consumed as kind of a thrilling experience, so it's much harder to kind of stay focused on the positive aspects. So what's your thoughts on hope as playwrights? Who would like to jump in?
Maybe I start first. Okay. Because I have also experienced, a few years ago, and then this kind of feeling about being hopeless, or thinking that, okay, humans, we don't have any moves or solutions. And then at the same time, I also think that it may be also some kinds of images we are consuming. That is, okay, especially for the movies, and then there is disasters or the end of the world and all the dystopias, and then you pay to get the tickets to watch it, and then, oh yeah, it is the end of the world, and then you consume the feeling of being at the end of the world. And then suddenly, because I'm invited in this panel discussion, and then my habits to do research and then find books, and then I've got one book called Not the End of the World, and then a scholar called Hannah Ritchie, and then it is very interesting because she also shared the same feelings for a few years, because she studied environmental science, and then every day she is facing those disappointing figures about this world. And then finally, she has a turning point, and then she really drills, because she is also a sociological background, and then she drills about the statistics, and then she finds that we actually, at these moments for humanity, we enjoy some of the best timing of the world, like we have low mortality rates, and also the woman who gives birth, who is going to die, okay, it is the lowest rate in these 20 years. And also like life expectancy and hygiene, blah, blah, blah. But what she wants to make the point is, okay, we have done something, we have done some achievements, but it is far not enough. We should also do much more. But if you always think that it is hopeless and then you won't take any action, and it is something she is against, I think it is the hope. The hope is, okay, not to feel, it is the end of the world and we should give up. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what you, Marwa, said in the beginning. Like, if you tell about the total destruction and there's nothing to be done, then you won't act on anything. Yeah. Himali, you just took your microphone.
I don't know. I mean, I think I just have to read the newspapers, right? If I have to write about gloom and doom. So why not write about something that might inspire action? I think if there's hope, then there is the will to act. If I accept that it is gloom and doom, then there is no purpose. I think hope gives purpose. Hope gives me the will to act. It gives one a reason to wake up the next day and do something that they have been maybe doing for many days. Maybe not seeing the result they were hoping or expecting. But the fact that maybe tomorrow will be different is hope. And that is why I will wake up and do the same thing again. So I don't see any, that is the reason I would like my stories to always end in hope and not in gloom and doom, so as to speak. Yeah.
It's my turn. I am a very cautious optimist in the sense of no gloom and doom, and we've read a million dystopias about the end of the world and humanity coming to its final demise and all of that. I think people have the right not to be hopeful. People have the right to be reasonably pessimistic, and it doesn't make them bad people. It just makes them people who've experienced the world in a certain way. I think if you open your eyes in a war zone and you continue to struggle with famine and all sorts of doom and gloom, then you're bound at some point to suffer that trauma and carry it with you. And people do have the right to talk about the ecological issue being a very traumatic event, because war scarcity in Africa today is a very traumatic thing, because there are parts in the world where you get electricity 2 hours a day, because there are parts of the world where you need to walk for kilometers to get water, and you can't really flaunt hope at these people and sort of be angry with them if they're not very hopeful, because the situation is quite dire for them. I think, however, that's when art can come in and can be a healing power, as was said before, in the sense of to maybe give an image of cautious optimism, because if we just remind ourselves, because we have a very short memory, and as humans we have a very short memory, and we forget oftentimes that we, in the history of planet Earth, are coming at the last 5 minutes of the 24 hours of the day of the planet is us. We're really coming at the very last chapter that is a figment of, it's a fraction, of billions of years of the life of the planet. And I think if we're talking about the world as the planet, then the planet existed before humans existed and will probably continue after. And the universe will continue very oblivious to our species ever existing. If we look at it as humanity, then humanity has undergone a bunch of crises before until it will continue to. That is, the ecological issue is, there is a nuclear threat is still a thing. We tend to forget, but it is still a thing. Hunger is still a thing, despite the improvement in the quality of life and all of that. But is that is very politically distributed, and wealth is not, there is no justice with wealth in the world. So as a matter of fact, there are people in Sudan today dying of famine, whereas other people are throwing food in the garbage. That's just the reality of our world. All of this is to say that hopeful or not hopeful, I don't know, maybe realistic, and I tend to be a bit optimistic with it, in the sense of what's going to happen tomorrow is completely unknown to us. Because, as a matter of fact, we could be hit from some sort of, I don't know the scientific word for it, but
asteroid.
Meteor. And it could just hit planet Earth, and we'll be done with this story, and it'll be like we never existed. So if we look at it from that objective perspective, then maybe we will end, and it's not going to be our fault. So the point is just to continue to live. To continue to live in the way that makes us human. And I think what makes us human, and I think the reason we survived up to now, is our fundamental capacity to love each other and to lend a helping hand and to feel empathy and to dream against all odds. And I think if we continue to harbor these feelings of basic human connection, then maybe it's not that bad. Maybe.
So cautious optimism it is. I'm rooting for it. We had this just before, and there was the word responsibility, and maybe that's something I would like to discuss with you a bit further. You said beforehand, Marwa, that we can't divide the world into Western and non-Western to find a solution. But let's have a look at an institution like the Deutsches Theater, which does a panel like this, which has a project involving globally or international authors to write about the crisis and to build a network to have a more global perspective on what's happening. How can an initiative like this be sustainable? So, I mean, you will part ways in a few days, and what's going to happen then? What is the seed you're maybe carrying with us, or what would you like to leave here for us to consider?
I think it just shows the power of collaboration, right? And I think when you talk about a crisis of a global level, collaboration is a must. No one country can solve it in isolation. So I think this, with all of us being here because of the theatre, shows the power of collaboration. And I think for me that is the biggest impact that a space like this can have to draw attention to something. Yeah.
Yeah, this is maybe going to sound a bit like blowing into my own horn in a way, but still I feel like this ATT on Air podcast project is like extremely revolutionary and very courageous and very innovative because it gives voices to, I think it's 50-something at the end, authors from all over the world with very different perspectives, with very different languages. You can hear all the authors speaking in their native tongue. I think this is highly important. It's accessible. I know it's in German, but still, I mean, I was able to understand enough to like listen to it, and it's accessible from all over the world, I imagine, because it's a podcast. I think this is highly inclusive, actually. So, yes, I think that type of initiatives are really, really important. Also for me as a writer, I have to say that this idea of writing at the same time about crisis and then hope, this was what we were like kind of offered to think about or to write about, is something that really inspired me creatively. It was a very new challenge for me, and I've had many challenges or many requests. This was interesting not only because of the content, but also because of the artistic form. And this is like me being a selfish author. I think this is also something that doesn't happen that often. Yes.
Can I just, sorry, just to add to what you were saying, about so many voices. But I think it's interesting that it's so many voices becoming one voice, right? And also the fact that language loses its importance on some level, and the space it's coming from, like it's all coming from different countries and different regions, and speaking about very local things. But obviously the global relevance is predominant, which is why we are all here from very different parts of the world. The fact that it didn't matter that our stories were local, they had a global resonance. So I think that's, for me, important from what you said.
Yeah, two parts. Okay, for being a writer, I always think that I have, sounds like very stupid, but I think I have a responsibility in response to the most urgent issue of the humanity. So that's why I start writing about climate crisis. And I think I am still, for the second part is, I still believe in theater, because theater is a place that you have to meet people in person. And I totally agree that connection is something that we have to do. And connection is our future, not isolation. And theater is exactly to be against isolation. So theater as an institution, if we keep openness, and then, okay, it means that we can enhance the future. Yeah.
Can I just add one more thing? For me, what was really interesting was this fight inside of my head while I was giving the task to be kind of optimistic or hopeful. I have like a classical theatrical training, which means a lot of drama, which means this notion that real art, like something that is valuable and has an artistic value, is something that needs to be like very tragical. There has to be like blood on the stage, people die, stuff like that, which of course, I mean, I'm not opposed to, but to kind of... but to kind of think outside of the box in the sense, what is actually a genre, you know? To kind of look past that, to kind of think, to offer like a bit of a different perspective, not just feed the need for like this exaggeration and like a lot of drama and like this shock doctrine that we are all like, you know, being brainwashed by the politics and by the media and so on. So this is something that I think theater has the power to stretch its muscles in that way.
I agree with everything that's been said.
Thank you.
I have nothing to add.
Great. So, theater as the art of storytelling and dialogue, which can foster connection, that sounds very hopeful for me, and as like an art form that will be needed now and in the future. So, thank you for like making me hopeful, and hopefully all of you as well. I would like to ask the audience now if you have any questions or would like to share something with us and with each other. And please wait for the microphone so that the people in the live stream can hear you. Thank you.
One question. You talked much about hope and that it's important to have hope in talking about climate change. And I also think that hope is a very big power when it comes to getting people to think that the world is changeable and not getting in desperation. But I think one other big power is anger that can be in theater plays and stories, and that, for example, Greta Thunberg's "How Dare You" speech was probably not about hope but about anger, and it inspired thousands, maybe millions of people. What do you think about anger in talking about climate change and in plays about climate change?
I believe in anger, surprisingly. And I believe in rage. And I believe that rage can be a catalyst as well. And I don't think anger and hope nullify each other. I think they can coexist. So you can be quite angry about something, and you can quite furiously demand change, and then at the end of the day you need to believe that that change is possible so that the anger doesn't become destructive. So I think the sort of balance to find is to be quite angry, that is angry enough to do something about it, but not just to wreak revenge. Be angry enough to bring change, and that's, I think, where the nuance is, in my opinion, humble as it is.
Yeah, I quite agree and also follow, but I just want to share one thing. In our mind, that's Buddhism, the Buddha, the figure of Buddha is very kind, calm, peaceful. But actually in Tibetan Buddhism, and then there is an angry phase of the Buddhism. And when does it happen? When he sees someone who is really stupid and destroying the world, and then he will be angry. So I totally on the same page with Marwa. That is, okay, it depends on how you use the anger. Is it for change, for justice, or just for revenge, or for your own private benefits? Yeah.
I believe the anger is a starting point, at least for me, for every like individual or for every writer. I'm like extremely angry about the stuff that I write. I just kind of try to be aware of the fact that I'm not screaming at the reader or at the audience, unless this is the concept of the performance, of course. So, you know, I think this is just maybe like, I really find your question quite interesting, because anger isn't something that would occur natural to me as a feeling about this topic, which is kind of strange, but still, maybe what I find interesting is how to enable like the audience or the reader to, you know, channel their own rage, how to kind of tackle artistically that.
What would you say is the role of humor in the writings about any kind of crisis? And when would you say humor is important or has a particular message in itself? And when would you say you wouldn't use it if you thought you deemed it not the right message?
I always think humor is very important because when I am writing, I'm always afraid of being too serious. And humor is something like imaginative, and also humor means you shift the perspectives. It means that, okay, no one is always right, okay, we always can find a new way of seeing the same thing. So humor is, for me, is very important in my play. Yeah, it is a way of thinking, actually. Yeah.
I think humor is important, yeah. But I think at the end of the day, it's about resonance, you know, and it's about sensitivity. And it could be sensitivity conveyed through humor, or humor conveyed through sensitivity, or it could be passion conveyed through sensitivity. Anger, the root of anger is passion. You're only angry if you're passionate about something, or you're fearful about something. So I think humor is also very delicate because it's very cultural. It can be, I think it just has to be applied, you know, well. And as a writer, that's something, you know, that one wants to focus on, especially in today's climate where it's very easy to get politically incorrect. So, you know, I think, yeah, I think that's something which I'm conscious about when I'm using humor, because I feel that it is more likely to get misconstrued sometimes. I'm not sure if that's the right approach for me. Probably it's a better approach to just go and be funny. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, you know, because stories travel, it's just like, I think there's more responsibility attached to telling anything, but definitely attached to humor. That's what I think.
Hello. Actually, I wanted to tell two separate things. The first was inspired by Simona's narration of the tree. I was just thinking about the paradoxical narrations, because our lives are all built upon different narrations. You know, we just narrated so many things at the moment with different vocabularies. But the thing that made me smile after a long trip here to Berlin was her narration that was paradoxical, exactly. The concept of the play for the tree and that poor tree that was done after the play. So these are thought-provoking narrations. Yes, everything is very much bitter. We come from Iran. We are in the middle of a crisis. And then I wanted to continue with the concept of anger. And anger is sometimes the drive to continue, to not give up. That was something that happened to us, you know, last year, because as a theater group, we didn't want to give up and we were angry. So we were angry enough to continue. So sometimes anger is the best thing for hope, the best road to hope, I suppose. And thank you so much. That was a great, great polyvocal, I suppose, lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for sharing. Is there another question or tale? Yes.
Darf ich meine Frage auf Deutsch stellen? Ist das möglich? Ja. Also ganz kurz, ich glaube, das Thema wurde auch angerissen ein bisschen. Ich frage mich, ob das möglich ist, überhaupt im Theater das Thema Klimakrise unabhängig von anderen politischen Themen zu behandeln. Und dass das eigentlich ein tief politisches Thema ist, weil letztendlich es geht auch um die Wirtschaftspolitik, um die Art und Weise, wie die Industrialisierung geführt wurde innerhalb von den letzten 100 Jahren. Es geht auch um zum Beispiel die Art und Weise, wie der Rechtsextremismus immer stärker wird in Europa. Kann man überhaupt dieses Thema behandeln, ohne diese politischen Faktoren? Flüchtlingskrise und viele andere Themen. Ich glaube, das ist unmöglich eigentlich, weil das ist auch ein hochpolitisches Thema. Einige von euch haben noch sehr interessanterweise darüber schon ein bisschen gesprochen, aber ich wollte noch mal die Frage direkter stellen. Und dann eine ganz andere Anmerkung.
May I translate it maybe?
Ja, bitte.
He's asking if you can write about the climate crisis without having a political awareness or factoring in all the things that are politically happening, like the refugee crisis or the rise of the far right, and as you mentioned, the economic aspects that make environmentalism to something that's not of necessity or can't be factored into the everyday life. That's his question.
Und die andere Anmerkung ist einfach, ich musste eigentlich auch, also ich frage mich, ob das ökologische Thema im Theater also keine Tradition hat, dass das eigentlich nichts Neues ist. Ich musste an den Totenbaum von Beckett denken, im Warten auf Godot. Ich frage mich, ob das schon überhaupt dieses Bild kein starkes ökologisches Bild ist tatsächlich und was er damit sagen will. Wir lesen das heute anders bestimmt und das ist überhaupt nicht, also Anfang der 50er Jahre, als das Stück geschrieben wurde, war natürlich die Klimakrise überhaupt nicht in dieser Art und Weise da. Aber trotzdem wird das Thema angesprochen. Es gibt einen Totenbaum auf der Bühne. Oder auch, ich musste an den Kirchgarten von Tschechow denken. Da geht es um tatsächlich affektive, emotionale Beziehungen zu einem Familienbesitz. Aber es geht dabei auch um die Natur und wie die Menschen mit der Natur verbunden sind. Ich glaube nicht, dass das eigentlich ein ganz neues Thema im Theater ist und vielleicht ist auch die Frage für die Theaterautoren oder auch Theaterregisseuren, wie kann man auch eigentlich diese Tradition fortsetzen, auch wenn man über die heutige Situation schreiben möchte in Bezug auf dieses Thema. Danke.
The honest member is asking if the ecological as a perspective isn't or hasn't always been there in theatre, like the dead tree in Beckett's Waiting for Godot or the cherry tree garden with Chekhov. Yeah, that's the second part. We had just a kind of hint that we are closing in on our goal of 8:30. So maybe one or two of you can answer each of the questions quite briefly because they're important questions. So thank you for them. First was the political backdrop of every climate crisis play, and the second is, hasn't it always been here, the ecological dimension of theatre?
Well, for the first one, I don't think you can extract the environmental problem from the political issue. I think they are quite interconnected, and I think that is the basic function of how the world is organized and divided today has led to the situation as it is, and we can't quite reflect upon it without taking into consideration the transactional political aspects of the issue. With regard to the second question, I do believe that the environment has always been there, and that's why I think this sort of angst is sometimes counterproductive, because it has always been there. It's just the level of consciousness that ought to be applied to it. And in that sense, again, ecodramaturgy can apply the lens of the ecological reading of a play, so we can go back to previous texts where it has always been there and sort of read it in a way that puts emphasis on where it all went wrong. That is, when did it stop being nature and it became this nature-cultural divide, when it became a backdrop instead of a fundamental part of who we are as a species. And I finished the 2 minutes?
Absolutely. No, we are not in such a hurry. It's just for the people going to the Euro Cup, maybe, and maybe not.
Maybe I answer the second question. I just want to say something. I don't deny that there are classics dealing with the climate crisis, because climate crisis is not only the contemporary issue, because it has lasted since, well, there are humans and also agricultural revolution, blah, 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 okay? But I would say every generation has their different kind of or also unique situation to deal with. So if we write for climate crisis for our generation or for our contemporary writers, we have to deal with the contemporary issue. So it is also going back like to the question one. So they're all in one. I mean, they can't be separate, yeah. It is a contemporary, so-called. Okay.
You? Yeah, sure. Go for it.
I don't need to, but I'll just say that I, yes, agree with I will answer the second question. Yes, I think like the art has always been interested in this very basic, very primal conflict that happens when a man or a person is divided from, like, the universe, the pain or the frustration or the conflict that occurs from that. So, and this is basically for me a climate crisis as well, being divided from something greater than ourselves.
Yes, and I mean that's what Una Chaudhuri is talking about, that enlightenment and the individualism have separated us from feeling connected to our surroundings. Yeah, that's something that art can help to reinstate. So thank you very much for being here, having been here, staying for a while, and for sharing your thoughts on how to write about the crisis. Thanks to DT for inviting us, to Johan Otten and Hélène Gauthier who have organized and thought of this panel. Thanks to the audience, live stream and here live with us. Yes, give a very warm round of applause to Marwa Manai, stop, Himali Kothari, Simona Hamer and Pat Tuyen. Now.